IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach Podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach, and today we're going to be talking about curiosity. It is something that I am extremely passionate about as a topic because one of my taglines for life is born curious. I love learning new things. And today with us, we have one of the perfect guests that I could think of to discuss this topic with. Siddharth Deshmukh is a podcaster, and he has a fantastic podcast called Smarter with Sid. And I have, we've chatted in the past, we've done stuff together, we did a YouTube video together, and it was always such an exciting conversation because we go into different areas because we're both very curious people. So I'm extremely excited to have this conversation with you. Siddharth, welcome to the Habit Coach Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashdin. I think that curiosity has a certain kind of energy around it, isn't it? And I just think that you've already introduced me so perfectly, so I don't need to add even a single word to it.
Oh, come on. Siddharth, tell us a little bit about yourself. Because, people need to have a little context on why we're having this particular conversation.
Context is very simple. I am a professor of digital first subjects. I teach across different institutes like MICA, SP Jain, Upgrad, etc., etc. I also am a digital transformation consultant. Sounds really big, but that's what it is. And I'm a podcaster. So I've done around 150 odd podcasts already with something that was called the Traveling Professor's Diary. And now it's rechristened as Smarter with Sid. So we've put in a few changes. I start off with facts and stuff like that. And mainly the Traveling Professor's Diary was sounding like a travel show, which it isn't. Because actually my Instagram handle is the Traveling Professor. So it just sounded very neat at that point in time. But now it's Smarter with Sid. So I've gotten smarter and hopefully I'll make other people smarter as well. So that's me in a nutshell. I live across UK and India. So I do keep traveling. So it is a real thing, although I'm grounded right now because of the pandemic. But that's how it is.
I love it. Where did you start noticing this curiosity and where did it start from in your life?
I think that curiosity is driven a lot by genetics. It's really interesting because I've tried to find a lot about it. Can you make somebody who is not curious? So you can make a little difference. But I think a lot of those people, who are born curious can actually infect other people with curiosity. So if I'm not curious, but you are a curious person, then in your company, I'll get more curious. Right. So that's the sort of infectious stuff, that's what curiosity is made of. But coming back to your original question, I actually think curiosity is certainly, you're born curious. But if you're not born curious, then I would recommend hanging out with some curious people. Just trying to make yourself a little more curious because it might just be pretty useful for you. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you said that there is a certain genetic element to it because my dad and I have this fight all the time. Because he claims that he's the most curious person on the planet. And I say, no, I am the most curious person on the planet. We have this constant fight together. But it's so interesting because you learn from your parents, right? And the way that they keep asking, why is this? Have you ever wondered about this? And you're like, if you have never wondered about this, where does curiosity come in from? And I think those starting blocks are so important. And if we have kids, creating the curiosity in them is so important.
I think, you're touching upon a very controversial topic, which is nature versus nurture, right? And now with you and your dad, we don't know whether he's nurtured you to be more curious or whether it's your nature because genetically driven. And maybe the suspicion would be that it's kind of a combination of both. But inherently, if I look at it, the curious nature of every child, is there. But then slowly over a period of time, some kids get into becoming more machine-like in there. Now, whether that is also natural or not, I don't know, right? But there are some kids who retain their curiosity, which is why you and your dad are having fights.
But when you are teaching kids and you're teaching people and students, how do you generate the curiosity in them? Because I'm sure not all of your students would be curious by nature, right? Or curious when they come into your class. How do you create that curiosity?
Yeah, no, that is something which I use something called the Socratic method, which is essentially I don't give gyan. So the whole idea in a classroom, and it does piss a few people off. I mean, few students off, because you get into a class thinking that the professor is going to give the answers, but we know that we are in an age wherein answers change every day, facts change every day. So the biggest disservice I could do to students is say, "Hey, I know everything. Here are the answers, and go for it." So instead of that, I use something called the Socratic method, or if I have to be hi-fi about it, something called knowledge construction. So the fact is, so what you do is you ask questions which lead to certain kinds of discussions in class, wherein the curious sparks in class actually start picking up on threads. And so therefore the learning is actually owned by the class rather than the professor. And I think that typically works at two levels. One is sometimes the class is, not sometimes, probably most times, the class surprises me with an insight that I couldn't have come up with myself, even with the subject that I'm teaching. And secondly, I think it makes curious people spread their infectious energy to people who are less curious.
That's such a beautiful thing. You touched upon 2-3 important points. The first one was that if I know everything and giving it, I'm doing myself a disservice, I'm doing them a disservice as well. And I remember hearing a lovely line that said that the learners are ready for the future. The learned are ready only for the past. And I loved it, because it said, if you know everything, it's always, your life is in the past, it's gone.
Correct.
But if you're constantly learning, the future is your oyster. Everything is available to you in the future. So I love that aspect of it. The second thing that you said was so interesting, which was to create curiosity by not giving answers, but asking and finding out how would you go about finding the solution. The question I wanted to ask you was, how do you do this in a medium like how we use podcasts, right? Which is primarily one directional, where you don't necessarily get the feedback on what the people who are listening in have actually ended up doing or not.
So it's a very, very, very good question. So I did some deep thinking on it. I do most of my deep thinking when I'm going for a walk somewhere. So the fact is that I realized that it's a microcast. I've got a microcast. It's not like a big podcast. But I realized that it is a monologue. So how do I make sure that I actually get people to have that sort of experience of, Now that's where I thought that I'm going to expose people to the way in which I think about a subject rather than talk about the subject itself. So then I thought about this, and then I was wondering, maybe this and whatever. So, so instead of just talking, this is cryptocurrency, I'm going to say, okay, so, is it going to work? And maybe I'm right in this, maybe I'm wrong. What do you guys? So that sort of thing, it's actually a conversation I'm having with myself in a sense. And that tends to work a lot, I think, because it keeps it as imaginatively interactive as possible.
I love that, because learning how to think is very different. We are all blessed with a brain, and because it came for free, we don't necessarily invest in learning how to use it. If you bought a fancy camera, you would be like, I need to find out what course I can use to figure out each button. But this marvelous thing came for free, so we don't use it at all, right? And learning how to think is such an important aspect. And going down that rabbit hole of learning how to think, because there's so many different theories, right? Or ways, like, for example, the method that you are teaching. How do you think that people should start exploring this as an option? One is curiosity, but thinking is also part of curiosity.
So I wrote a book on this subject. It's a shitty book. Don't read it. But I wrote a book on the subject, which wherein I got an insight, because I'm curious, right? So I realized that most of us have preset neural networks in our brain. Okay. Now I'm going to say 4 words to you and see if they resonate, right? I'm going to use these words. I'll say curiosity. We've been talking about curiosity. There's a network in your brain that is built around curiosity. The second is around wanting something. I want that. So that's certainly, there's a network around wanting. The third is resistance. Okay, so I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. So there's that piece as well. And the fourth is giving. So, and all of these neural networks actually have associated emotions with it. So you have, when you're in the neural network of giving, there's a love feeling or whatever. When it's wanting, it could be lust, but when it's giving, it has to be love or empathy or whatever. If it's resistance, and the energy is also different. So wanting, curiosity, giving, and what was the fourth one? Wanting, curiosity, giving, and
receiving.
No. hang on, we'll get there. We are curious people. So, curiosity, resistance, wanting, and giving. So I was resisting resistance, I think.
I thought resistance was a fantastic one, because I never thought about it. We think fear, but we never think resistance.
Yeah. So here's the weird thing. I think resistance is also good, because the guy who, had that resistant thing going, the guy who created the bed, let's say, right, was resisting sleeping on the floor. And so he used the neural network of resistance and curiosity and then created a bed, right? So that's why we are more comfortable. So I think resistance is also very useful. These are networks that are there in our head. And I think that if we are able to actually understand how we are functioning with these networks, neural networks or mental models, you want to call it, I think we'll be better off. We just move around without really knowing how to use our brain. But if we understand, okay, I'm in resistance nowadays. I should be moving towards curiosity, or I'm in giving, too much of giving. Maybe I should want something. I don't know what my goals are. I don't know. So it could be particularly useful if we can actually have a manual for our own brain in that sense.
Firstly, my mind is blown. I'd never thought about it in these 4 ways, especially the way that you define resistance is because, the whole habit coach podcast, not just the podcast, but habit coach as a category was created from a place of resistance, which was that people resisted doing anything because they didn't believe they had the motivation to do it. They didn't believe they had the self-discipline to do it. So my funda was that if I tell you that you don't need the self-discipline and motivation, all you have to do is these tiny, tiny things. Sab kuch so everyone can do it. Right? So it's so interesting that now the penny is dropping that I'm hearing you saying that I actually created something using from this thought process of resistance.
Yeah. So it was, it is brilliant because you used both curiosity and resistance to develop this. And you know what? You did something even more amazing, which was that you circumvented the brain. So when you're giving small things to do, what you're doing is you're engaging the body with, and therefore completely bypassing most of the brain thinking, which essentially means that you're going to get into a habit, which is I'm sure you know about this a lot, or you've been a practitioner of this. But circumventing the brain is a damn difficult thing to do.
It wants to think all the time and everything.
All the time.
Puts a little 2 bits in it, like little. Like the little agony aunt.
Yeah, it is.
So, one of the things that, at least in our office, we have a big struggle with, and I think we're doing this completely wrong with the people who work in our office, is that we want to develop curiosity in them. And we keep saying that you should be reading books, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, you should be doing this. And I think we fail miserably when we go down that approach. Correct? How should we start developing curiosity if it is not something that is already innate in us?
I think you should probably use Socratic questions. So why does something be like this, or why is something like this? Instead of read this to know why something is like this. So if you ask that question and say, okay, and incentivize that question.
Interesting. Best
answer, vada pav, whatever the hell, right? So that, not vada pav because you're into health. So let's say some salad. I don't know, but you know what I'm
nobody
saying.
Will do it then. They will like a health food nature. You keep your why to yourself.
Yeah, but I think the curiosity thing is sparked when you are not providing answers. So you should read books. The residue is I don't want to read books. But do you know that there are 3 brains inside your one brain? And you're only using one brain? And like, what? Yeah. And aren't you curious how you will be when you're using the second one? Like, okay. So it could help. The second thing is, when you're looking at new hires, obviously you'll be looking at more curious people. Find a way in which they can be non-gyani, maybe. But just be curious, just be themselves and curious and bubbly and energetic, because curiosity has that energy that is, that can infect the rest of the office.
Yeah, because curiosity is a fuel. In fact,
yes,
I use curiosity as a fuel for the podcast. So, we just finished 500 episodes, right?
That is phenomenal. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That is so cool. Yeah, it's so cool.
It's crazy, like to think of 500 different habits and all of that, right? And the only way to do it is to be super curious about every little bit in your life so that you can actually learn from it. And each of our podcasts start starts off with a did you know fact. And for me, when I prepare my podcast, the did you know fact is what charges me up, saying, now what will I find out new about breathing, for example? Or what new thing can I find out about that? So curiosity is something that I use as a fuel as well.
That is so cool. And I think that you are 500, by the way, and you still look as fresh as a daisy. So you're not looking like a war veteran at all. I think it's an amazing thing. And I've listened to a lot of your episodes. And I think that you're certainly an inspiration. When I joined the whole podcasting thing, you were there already. And I think that it's been an inspiration to somebody like me to continue, for a long time, because you do require to be curious, especially if you're doing something like what you're doing, and maybe to an extent what I'm doing too. So the fact is that unless and until you're enjoying it, you're not going to be able to do it, right? You can only have that much of willpower.
Correct. That masti is important. And having that masti in learning, I think, is the critical thing. In fact, I was going to lead into that direction, which was how to make learning fun. Because you're a professor, right? And I remember that in school we had like dodgy, stodgy professors and teachers that you just didn't want to like interact with. And then you had in college, you had a teacher that came and just started throwing words at you that you had to quickly write down.
Absolutely.
It's just the way that you learn is so important, because there's this one teacher that taught me something that I will never forget because of the way it was taught to me. Correct? How do you learn? How do you make masti in learning?
So first of all, I truly believe in creating completely relaxed atmosphere in class, because I genuinely feel that the learning quotient goes up when you're relaxed. And relaxation means not like sleeping or something in class, but the relaxation means that, okay, you're not tense and you're not trying to write down notes. I mean, sure, you can write down notes, but write down something that is truly meaningful to you. So that's one. The second thing is, I think most people, including professors, think that, I'm going to use two big words again, curriculum is equal to pedagogy, which means curriculum is what you teach and pedagogy is the way in which you teach it, right? So most professors have got a lot of information, knowledge, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. So they will focus on what they teach, but they will not focus on how they teach it. And how they teach it, sure. So if you use something like the Socratic method, which we talked about before, it will certainly spark off things. But then you got to take that extra mile. Like, for example, I was teaching project management, which can be a very dry subject. But what I thought was that, okay, and I was teaching it in Mica, wherein everyone's a storyteller, right? So I thought, okay, chalo yaar, I'm going to show movies. So I showed 3 movies. One was, Apollo 13, okay, wherein, things got screwed up in space. And so they had to change their method. They had to change the way in which they did things. And they moved from a very systematic way of doing things to, fly-by-night sort of thing. So lessons from there. The second was Moneyball, wherein, everything was dissected and completely sorted out and not played on the field, but played somewhere else. So that showed the power of analysis. And then there was the founder, which was, McDonald's, and how McDonald's kind of made sure that it understood what it had to replicate and scale things up. So all 3, I just said, hey, see this movie, and then let's talk about this movie. So I think that probably kind of helps. So you have to take an extra step, I think, for pedagogy.
Lovely. And is it the responsibility of the teacher to have the pedagogy, or is it something that the student can create with him or with his friends if the teacher is not somebody who can put it generally in this way?
I think a student is really not capable of having power over the teacher in a classroom setting. So even though a student might have beautiful ideas, if he kind of contributes it to the teacher, there's always a fear of retribution. That, the teacher is going to grade him badly or say that he's a nuisance in class, because, everybody wants certainty and teachers want more certainty because you're going on stage. So if some guy says, oh, what if we do it this way? And if you're not alive to the moment and you want to stick to your script, then, the student then becomes a nuisance. I wish more professors are alive to the moment, but I don't think professors are actually taught beyond a point how to teach. So that actually makes them stick to the tried and tested scripts, as I would say. So student has very less power, Ashdin. I don't think that could, yeah.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. on the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. In the first half, Ashdin is joined by Varun to wrap India's ODI tour of Sri Lanka. In the second half, DJ joins the party to discuss the first T20 international between India and Sri Lanka. If you'd like to hear more about this match, former Indian cricketer Sabha Karim joins Rajiv Mishra on Khel Niti and they talk some more about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're really excited to announce a new show, a show about crypto with Rohan Joshi. He's going to dive deep and demystify all this crypto stuff that we've been hearing about. And let me tell you a little bit more about stuff that's going on the network really quickly. Congratulations to Maru Kinayat, who celebrates 50 episodes of The Note with a discussion on health as a fundamental right. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Harsha Chetanwala of mywealthgrow.com. Zarina Poonawala is starting a new miniseries on emotional intelligence. Do check out the kickoff episode on the Empowering series. And Simplified talks about semiconductors. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show, or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. That's really helpful for us. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors on the network this week. They make this all possible. Thank you very much, Ciet, Cred, Global Victoria, Bank of Baroda, Intuit India, Lenovo, and CoinSwitch Kuber. We really appreciate your support.
Welcome back. Let's jump into the conversation. When you were talking about this, I was remembering this one conversation I had with a doctor friend of mine. So she's an endocrinologist. Okay. And I've gone through Gray's Anatomy, the book and everything. I've studied so much on anatomy now out of curiosity. But when I think back to my biology class, where I didn't care a damn about anything that I was studying and I was trying to avoid it. Now there is a difference, right? Now I want to find out about mitochondria and what creates it and what ATP is and how does ATP get created and all of that. Because now there is something that I see value in. Correct? I think there's a big difference between the way education's taught to us in that context and the way that we understand what we've learned from a value point of view.
I think you're absolutely bang on. Today I'm interested in behavioral biology, but I wouldn't have ever been interested in a subject which is as vague as that. But now I'm studying baboons and the way in which they behave in Central Africa, just because I want to actually figure out what's in it as a human species that will tell me from the baboons and how can we actually hack into behavioral biology to make, let's say, marketing different or something like that, or management different. But the fact is that you're right. I mean, purpose is not really sorted out. I think you just start teaching stuff like, this is mitochondria. Who cares, man? Right? But eventually, if I say, hey, you want to manage the energy in your body? Okay. Do you want to manage? And so then, do you know something about the gut biome? Okay. So then you can go on, right? And then you can actually peel off layers, and then somebody will be interested in what bacteria are or whatever.
Correct. Absolutely. I think that finding that purpose, finding what is the value in what I'm learning and what is the value in the curiosity that I'm bringing to the table. Every time I do, so one way of getting that feedback from the listeners is I have these question answer sessions that I do on Instagram. So, you have that ask me anything kind of things. And a lot of people ask in this Q&A thing about I'm not growing at my work. Nothing's changing in my life with this. I always bring it back to curiosity. And I keep saying that remember that you don't have a salary problem. You have a value problem. It is that you're not bringing anything more to the table, right? It is a skill problem that you have at that point of time. And very often there is so much resistance to getting a new skill on board. Not realizing what is that value that they're going to get from it. All the problems that they're seeing in terms of their salary and job and not being appreciated and all can be solved by learning a new skill. Maybe becoming better at presenting. Right? Something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I you're so right. And people get the timing all wrong. Like, for example, so because they're getting feedback, main to promote nahi ho gaya, I'm not promoted right now, is when they start thinking in terms of, oh shit, I need to get promoted. So what do I, and then therefore they want instant results. When they should actually be focusing on learning a skill and then maybe after a year or 6 months or whatever, look out for another job or get promoted then. But, the feedback loop is such that they want instant gratification. The ego comes in and drives it to a large extent. And I think that becomes a big problem. But it must be a challenge, no? For somebody like you who's getting these questions in so many different ways, to actually give unpopular answers in that sense to people, because people, and kudos to you for doing that.
No, thank you for that. And it's so interesting because you're constantly learning from some of the greatest, salesmen in the world. Like there's a person called Zig Ziglar. Have you heard Zig Ziglar
Yes.
talking? Isn't
Of
he
course, yes.
absolutely brilliant? And I've been
Yeah,
binging.
he's no more. Yeah, he's
He passed away. Yeah.
Yes, passed away. Yeah.
It's 1970s. He was in
Your
the heydays. Yor.
correct.
Like all his examples are was a Manika also. So it's
No,
really
but he's
cute.
good. He's very good. Yeah.
In fact, I was just recording a YouTube video where he was talking about positivity, and he was saying that, I tell people I'm so positive that I will go hunting for Moby Dick in a rowboat and carry tartar sauce with me because I know I'm going to do it. That is the kind of energy that he brings to the table. And
Not
I was
bad.
listening to one of Zig Ziglar's talks, and he was talking about this, and he was saying that, if you don't give more value, you're not going to get what you deserve. But he's saying that the more value you give, you will get it back in return, whether it is in this job or in the future. If this person doesn't appreciate you, don't worry. It's going to come. It's going to come from somewhere else. And you have to learn to give before you receive.
So how do you deal with something like that? Because it changes form, right? It changes form. It people don't believe that. Because what they want is in A, instant gratification, and B, in the form that they've imagined it.
Yeah.
So I think it is a damn tough thing to not to crack, actually. I don't know how.
Very similar to all the entrepreneurial movies that you would have seen and shown people, right? Because entrepreneurs have only one skill, which is delayed gratification. If you do not know how to have delayed gratification, you cannot be an entrepreneur. That means that you have to put in shitload of hard work, gali, late nights, only then you receive it later on. Because the instant gratification model is a drug. There is a very interesting quote that I read the other day, that there is one drug that the world is addicted to. And I'm not talking about cocaine, I'm not talking about marijuana, I'm not talking about coffee either. He called it the salary. And he was saying that imagine if I give you less of a salary, you're going to get itchy. You're going to get withdrawal symptoms. So I hold back your salary, you're going to get withdrawal symptoms. If I give you more of it, you're going to be happy. What is that? That's a drug, right? Yeah. And if you're so addicted to our salary, that means how can you ever quit and think about delayed gratification? So our society is being built on this concept of delayed gratification as well. And if you can, not instant gratification. So if you can teach yourself delayed gratification, I think that is a huge skill set.
It is incredibly tough. Actually, funnily enough, Ashdin, even waiting for a salary is kind of a delayed gratification because you're getting salary at the end of a month, right? So I've always been wondering, how can these same people actually wait till the end of the month to get the salary, right? So there must be something weird happening over there. So maybe it's also the fact that there's certainty to it. That I am going to get that kind of thing, and then there is and my fix. So there's certainty to it, and I think that also plays a massive factor.
I'll give you another way of thinking about this. That nobody thinks that they're getting paid at the end of the month. They all think that they're getting paid at the beginning. Because when do they get their salary? They get the salary and then they spend it through the month. So they start spending it. Many people have spent it before they get the salary in their bank.
That is so true. I think your observation is than mine on this. You're right, because behaviorally you're just going and spending stuff. At the beginning of the month.
At the beginning of the month, it's come in and it's gone. And in fact, when you think about savings and when we talk about saving habits, and many people don't have savings as a concept, right? Salary, they're living basically by the end of the month, they have no money. And they have no money to save because they think of saving as jo bhi leftover is what I will save. And the concept of saving is that you take away 10% right in the beginning and only spend what is left over, the remaining 90. So once you do that.
I think value systems have also changed across generations. So if I look at, and I might be sounding like an old bloody fuddy-duddy right now, but if I look at the way in which we are looking at the younger cohorts are looking at experiences over materials, right? Then you're saying, hey, I don't know, I'm going to die. So I'm going to go for that Europe trip and I'm not going to invest in building a flat in Vashi or whatever, right? So that's what is also happening. But I feel that it is just a subset of that whole instant versus delayed gratification thing. Sure, I understand that a Europe trip is not something, but you're going to Leh Ladakh. But it's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The concept of kal kisne dekha hai? Who's seen tomorrow, right? Enjoy right now when it's there. ZMD. Not going to happen again.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate fact is, that we're
How
going
do
to
you
be living
deal?
till 150. Oh, so I'm at least planning to live till 150. So,
Perfect. No, I like it. I have two questions for you. Sorry,
mm, mm,
I'm turning the tables on you. One
mm,
is this ZNMD celebrated 10 years, right?
mm.
And Hrithik Roshan's thing was in the paper today, and it's like, what do you feel and all of that. Wonderful sort of interview. The fact is that how do you, as the habit coach, actually look at telling people not to? So there is something around enjoying the journey, and there is something around going for the outcome. So how do you navigate that? So that's question one. And second question is this 150 thing. Okay. And I'll come to that later, but answer the first one first.
Okay, lovely. So the first one is very interesting. There are approximately 2 to 3 things that you do in life that give you the most amount of joy and pleasure compared to everything else. Right? For some, it is traveling. For some, it is shopping. For some, it is cars. Right? There's 1 or 2 maximum. On those, spend lavishly. But on all the others that are societal things that you are expected to have and expected to do, and you're doing it for others, don't do. So, for example, for me, branded clothes are not something that float my boat, but I have to do it because other people are going to judge me. Don't spend on it. Correct? Buy my 150 Amazon wala t-shirt, chalega. So that is the way to start thinking about it, and go lavish on the stuff that you thoroughly enjoy. On the other stuff, don't even think about it.
That's lovely. That's lovely. So that's a really good insight. The second question is, you talked of this 150 thing, no? So what's your guesstimate? This 150, suppose you're trying to live to 150. Is it going to happen through medicine? Is it going to happen because we discover some aspect of biology that we don't know so far? Or is it going to happen because we are just getting better at taking care of ourselves health-wise?
So the dying of an acute illness is far lower now. So that is the one that is what used to take maximum amount of lives earlier. Acute illness means suddenly somebody got typhoid, somebody got malaria. Dying of those kinds of things now is practically down to like a few percentage. Correct? So that is one. The biggest killer in the world is chronic disease, which is your diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, those kinds of things. So if you know how to deal with those, and those are all lifestyle issues, you can get those out of the system. Then it comes on learning that aging can be considered a disease. And if you start thinking about aging as a disease, you can now start understanding that maybe there's something to do with it. And the starting point is not accepting aging as a natural process that has to happen to everyone. Because if it's a natural process that has to happen to everyone, why do all different animals have different ways of aging? So, for example, have you heard of I think it's called the moleskin rat?
Moleskin rat. Right? Yes. Yeah.
They found a fascinating thing about the moleskin rat and its DNA. And the fact that its DNA does not unravel the way ours does. So imagine if you could learn about what is it that's making that not happen. So there's these telomeres, right, which are the endings of your DNA, which are like
the DNA.
Like
and then the shorter they become, they'll tell you, okay, you're going to pop off in 10 years.
Correct, exactly.
Okay, all right.
So if you can learn those aspects, and this is the part where you're talking about the technology coming in, and making it. But I don't think it's going to come from the medicinal world, because the medicinal world is all about you first falling sick and then telling you how not to be. So this is going to come from other means. So there are a lot of companies that are looking at energizing you, making sure, like you're talking about mitochondria and all of that is upregulated, keeping those things up. So I think those are fascinating things.
Lovely. Yeah, no, but the reason why I was asking this question is because I'm studying biology from a different perspective as you, and you're studying biology from a different. So it's just fascinating to see the crossover. So when I'm studying biology, what I'm trying to figure out is how are human beings evolving, right? So, like for example, if I look at the way in which our genetic makeup is, it's driven towards reproduction and survival. Survival first, then reproduction, and then there is something called adaptation. Right, there's this third thing called adaptation, because adaptation only happens if
under stress.
Under stress, under different contexts, and maybe if you have to take that leap forward. So that leap in evolution only happens with adaptation, right?
Mm.
So I'm always interested in knowing how adaptation happens and whether we can actually circumvent the evolutionary DNA driven thing rather than just focus on okay, so I'm going to die, I'm going to live, I'm going to have kids, and I'm going to die, and that's what's going to happen to me. So and plus once I understand the drives that are there in a human being, then I could potentially use them for mundane subjects like maybe marketing or management and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. Obviously, I have not used telomeres or any of the other stuff that I have used in management class, but it's just fascinating to see the way in which we look at the same subject.
Absolutely. It's so interesting because whenever we talk about DNA and genetics, we think about genetics as something that you're either born with or you're not going to be.
Correct.
Right? मतलब मेरे family में diabetes है, मुझे भी diabetes होने वाला है. Right? But there's this whole new field of study that is coming out that is saying that your DNA is nothing but a possibility. So you can't change your nose.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
You can't change your nose. But you can turn on and turn off certain coding in your DNA to make sure that you don't get your diabetes. And learning about this is important. And for some reason, this word is missing in my mind right now, but there's a technique, there's a word that describes this process. And as soon as it comes up, I'll tell you.
No, it's okay. But I think that's what leads to adaptation, actually. What you're saying, that's exactly what leads to adaptation. And I'm fascinated by it. I was telling you that this is the power of curiosity, right? What did we start off and we're about to talk about danger, okay? So did you know that our teeth, and we all have teeth problems, right? Almost every single person has a tooth problem, teeth facing out, teeth facing in, one jaw this way, one jaw that way. What caused that? Wait, I know this. I know this. It was people removing the back molars. Is that right?
No. It was our food getting softer. Because we started learning how to cook, we started chewing lesser. Because we started chewing lesser, we started using our jaw lesser. And as a result, our jaw structure started changing. So if you look at the tribals, none of them have dental issues. Because they're all still chewing on those tubers and all of that. We are trying to go from...
This is beautiful, but this tribal thing, it goes both ways. A lot of people say, "Yaar, wo tribal log dekho kitne healthy the," etc. But if I look at the average age of people who used to be in tribes or people who used to actually be 100 years back, they used to pop off at whatever 30 odd years of age. So obviously they have perfect teeth in that sense, right?
No, not in that context. You were born with perfect teeth. You were not born with perfect teeth.
That's true.
That's the difference. So, in fact, it is completely true what you said, but most of them die of acute illnesses, unfortunately. The second aspect is that putting the tribal stuff that we learned into our modern world is like comparing apples and oranges, because they are not exposed to the kind of water we have, not exposed to the kind of the air we have.
It's a bit unfair. Yeah.
It's unfair. And we say that, their microbiome is the best. We need that kind of microbiome. Waisa nahi hota hai. So you have to take all those aspects with a pinch of salt, see what are the things that you learn. But coming back to what you were talking about, behavioral biology, I studied social anthropology when I was in Xavier's, which was all about understanding how behavior changed from monkeys to what we are now. Correct? What did social structure start at? How is the monkey social structure and how is ours? Absolutely fascinating. That was one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah. No, it actually biology leads to anthropology and sociology because mankind as womankind or person kind or whatever. It essentially we are tribal, and because we are tribal, we need to understand rules of being in a tribe. I don't think even if I say I am a rebel, being a rebel is still in comparison to tribe members. If you can't be a rebel in the wolf world because nobody gives a shit there. So it's fascinating to see how that whole thing plays out. My feeling is that it is going to be so whenever I'm studying my subjects, whenever I'm teaching, I have to go to anthropology, I have to go to sociology, I have to go to biology, because unless and until we understand the drives, how am I going to look at the application of those drives? Because if I look at management and marketing and all of that, they're the application of these drives eventually.
It all starts with that. And if you ever listen to Feynman, he'll say everything starts with physics. So it's all physics teaches chemistry teaches biology. So
he's written a book which was called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, or whatever. So
I love it. It's one of those books that I recommend everyone read. Just it's like we were talking about curiosity. This gentleman, Dr. Feynman,
he was the curious guy.
He was the curious person, right? He's tried experiments on the strangest things. Guys, okay, you have to listen to some of the stories that are there in the Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman book. Please read it. Yes. But if you don't, there's this one part where he says that, as a science teacher, I'm not very good with girls. Let me figure out how do I go and pick up girls. And then there's this entire chapter on how he goes thinking about picking up girls and how he speaks to different people and all of that. It is just so curious and how...
it's fantastic. And he never accepted answers which didn't make sense to him. Apparently, there was some painter who said, no, my paint apparently automatically becomes a different color. It looks red in the can and becomes yellow outside. And then he figured out that, this guy was mixing paint. So it's obviously you need a curious mind for something like this. Yeah.
No, I think ending this podcast with Feynman is a beautiful pause to this. The most curious person that we clearly know. I'm sure my dad will agree with me on this one as well.
I think then we should certainly stop there.
Right? Siddharth, thank you so much for coming on the Habit Coach podcast. I absolutely loved it. I love the takeaways about creating curiosity and just the way that this conversation went, right? An idea you said sparked something off in my mind. We discussed something else. We were exchanging, we were learning from each other. I think creating this environment is such a beautiful way of learning and building curiosity. So thank you so much for actually showing this to us with experimentation. I mean, through example.
Yeah, no, I think it takes two curious people to float this particular boat. So I'm sure that this is... Thank you so much for inviting me. And I've always been a big time fan of the Habit Coach and whatever you're doing. And all the very best to you. 500 more beckon you. And you will remain fresh as a daisy. And,
150.
Yeah, absolutely. And
the word was epigenetics. That's the word I was searching for.
Epigenetics. This guy, what's his name? That guy. Okay, forget him. Epigenetics. I know. The study of the environment and how it impacts
your DNA.
Genes. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So the fact that your environment can affect your genes. So the air that you're breathing is affecting your genes. Correct. Okay, this is another rabbit hole. Before we get down that one. Siddharth, thank you so much for coming.
All right. Wonderful. Pleasure. Wonderful. Same here. Have a safe trip and an enjoyable one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Take it easy.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM Network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं, हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार।
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawalla, host of the Empowering Series podcast on the IVM Network. I happen to be a peak performance coach and leadership coach by profession, and I'm here to share with you productivity tools, life-altering techniques, and real-life hacks to help you achieve your maximum potential in everything you do, your relationships, professions, careers. So tune in every Monday to unleash your inner power. Be safe, be well, be empowered.